Hello and welcome back to Crit and Crit. I'm Scint,
I'm Axion.
and we are continuing our playthrough of Final Fantasy V and our discussion of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. This time we are taking a brief look into the very, very broad topic of power dynamics. Specifically, when one is given power, how responsibly must one handle it? Uncle Ben has entered the chat. So, as you might expect from a story set in a school about a coming-of-age whole situation, there are many, many, many different examples of how power dynamics assert themselves over the course of Harry Potter. This one in particular, we get to see this a little more personally because they are fifth years now, which means a couple of people in each house are named prefects to help patrol the school and enforce some of the minor rules. And, well, as we've seen before, they also have the power to award and take away house points. Given how competitive the school tends to be with the House Cup, you can probably already see how this system could be ripe for abuse, depending on which students are given the privilege of being a prefect.
I forgot that item does that.
Welp. So, that means there are 8 new prefects this year. The only ones that we really care about for our purposes would be Ron and Hermione from Gryffindor, and Malfoy from Slytherin, and you can probably already tell where this is going.
So, let's start with Hermione, because, let's be blunt, Hermione is, of the three, the obvious choice for becoming a prefect.
Yep, and she is the one who seems to be most concerned with the rules, most concerned with setting a good example. Which, again, doesn't really come as a surprise, given that it's Hermione. It is kind of surprising, given that Hermione goes through a lot of character development up to this point and does some things that you would not expect of Hermione earlier on. But that'll be a separate episode.
Yep.
Ron was the surprising choice. Harry was sure it was going to be him. Or at least he was surprised that Ron got chosen over him, which kind of a lot to read into there, Harry, but we get an explanation later on. It honestly gives Ron quite a confidence boost, and we do see that Ron seems fairly uncomfortable with it, at least in terms of he doesn't really act like you'd expect a prefect to act.
Yeah, but let's focus on Hermione for now. We'll get to Ron when we're done.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't think of much else to add on Hermione either.
Well, for one, she takes her job as a prefect extremely seriously, to the point that, honestly, she might be putting more value on it than Harry puts on some of his own responsibilities. Hermione is not afraid to penalize her own house, which Ron seems reluctant to do. Hermione is not averse to enforcing the rules equivalently for Gryffindors, whereas Ron and Malfoy both are prone to overlooking some of their house's particular indiscretions, which is basically kind of what we've come to expect from people in power in this story. Hermione is, in many ways, the model student for this kind of position. And on the one hand, that's very impressive of her. That shows that she is a responsible and level-headed student who understands the responsibilities as well as the privileges of her position. It also kind of makes her something of a... what's the word I'm looking for here? Not an antagonist, but no longer strictly and completely in support of Harry and whatever he chooses to do through his course as the protagonist of the story. There's a few times in the story where Harry does something or says something or wants to do something, and Hermione has to tell him that as a prefect, she can't support him when he's doing this or that. And Harry seems exceptionally frustrated by it. Also, completely aside, I really like Ferris's samurai outfit and animations.
Right, so yeah, that's Hermione as the good example. We have Ron as basically kind of a middling example. He's not a terrible prefect, but he's not really good on the rules, he's not really good on acting professional, he tends to play favorites, and Hermione more than once has to lecture him on setting a good example. He's quite proud of it because, well, it gives him a chance to, stand out in his family again, even though it's not even the first time someone in his family has gotten to be prefect.
But it's been a while.
Yeah. Not since Percy.
Yep.
So it's not been that long. Just a couple years.
And it is kind of one of those situations of it's Percy, and as we discussed last episode, Percy is kind of on the outs with the family. So now the family has another prefect. Why did I go there? I can just go back to the library and get healed for free. Now that the family has another prefect in their numbers besides Percy, who's no longer talking to anybody, they can they can take that as a point of family pride without the associated frustration of Percy no longer being on good terms with the rest of the family. So it gives Ron something he can be proud of. And also something that the family currently does not have that they can point to and say, someone has already done this and they're still around to take credit for it.
I think Bill also got to be prefect.
I don't remember.
But yeah, it's kind of it's a good confidence boost for Ron, but not quite enough of one to do a really good job because, like, when it comes to Fred and George testing their products on first years, Ron's kind of afraid to go tell off his older brothers. Hermione walks right up and says, I'm going to write to your mother if you don't knock this off. And they know Hermione will frickin' do it because it's Hermione and she doesn't care. Hermione gets things done.
Yep.
So,
unfortunately, so does Malfoy. And I think this is a good point to make that jump over to him.
Yep. So, we're pretty sure Malfoy got recommended because he is Snape's pet. Also, probably because Lucius Malfoy leans on things quite heavily. Malfoy, as we've seen, is not a great student. He's fine, but he's not really that good. He's kind of lazy on things. He'd rather have other people do things for him. And he will absolutely find a shortcut every single time. He would rather throw his weight around than actually, do it the hard way, because why would I want to work for something when I'm in a privileged position and can just get whatever I want, and what are you going to do about it? He always, as we've seen before, he always screws around in front of Snape because he knows Snape favors Slytherins very, very heavily and isn't going to do anything to stop it. Especially when he's targeting people that Snape doesn't like. Giving Malfoy the chance to be a prefect means he instantly takes advantage of his new position and starts harassing people he doesn't like. Which is basically exactly what we expect from Malfoy, let's just be perfectly honest there. So yeah, Malfoy would be our bad authority figure on the prefect side of things. But we also need to kind of segue from Malfoy a bit into the broader spectrum of bullying. It's come up before, it's going to keep coming up because we're in a school setting, and that's a huge issue of a power dynamic. And Snape is an interesting example in that he gets to see it from both sides. We have been used to Snape as the terrible teacher who, while competent at potions, uses his position to make many of his students' lives a living hell, to the point where he is the thing that Neville is the most frightened of, as we saw with the Boggart incident. Snape abuses his position because, as we get to see, he was on the bottom of the pecking order when he was in school. He was constantly being targeted and bullied by those around him. In particular, James Potter and Sirius Black.
And interestingly, when we see that flashback, we also see that Remus Lupin, a very close friend of Potter and Black, was also a prefect, similar to how Ron, and to a lesser extent Hermione, are prefects, and Ron tends to look the other way when Harry or his brothers do something that should probably be chided. The main difference being James Potter goes about 6 steps higher than Harry or the Weasley brothers.
Yep, which we've actually known for a couple of books. Remember back in Azkaban, we learned that James's idea of a prank was to send Severus to go look in on a transforming Lupin, which could have gotten him killed or cursed.
Yep.
Lupin didn't know that James was doing that. So,
yep.
Yeah,
but
trying to get someone in your class killed or permanently maimed goes a bit beyond bullying.
Yep, precisely. The main difference here is that Lupin is, in the flashback we see from Snape's Pensieve, is that Lupin is right there and does nothing. It takes Lily, who I can't remember her main name,
Evans,
to step in and get Potter to stop. And even then, he only does so reluctantly and treats her as an annoyance for getting in his way.
And we also know that he mostly stopped because he has a thing for Lily and wants to get her attention.
Yep.
And when Harry brings this up to Sirius, Sirius, like many former bullies do, completely brushes it off as not a big deal, it was fine, and even admits that, yeah, James never really stopped giving Severus the business, even after he calmed down and stopped being as much of a turd to everybody else. So, this does really shake Harry's worldview, because if you recall, he's basically spent the entire series up to this point thinking that his dad was a good person and a hero because he was told that your father saved Snape's life. Which loses a lot of its impact when you're told he saved his life because he got cold feet on the prank he was pulling that would have probably gotten him killed.
Yep, he saved his life from himself, even more on top of that.
Yeah. And since Harry has been pretty horribly bullied up to until he went to Hogwarts, that's gotta be hard. That's just hard to reconcile with. I never knew my father. I've gotten to hear these accounts from him, and then Snape just says, "Yeah, your father was awful," and if you don't know any better, so you'd think this would be a good chance for Harry and Snape to kind of bridge their differences, but that doesn't happen. Snape doubles down, as does Harry, and bad things happen as a result.
Yeah. To be fair, I can give Snape at least a little leeway here. Harry was prying into memories that he had no right to go looking into. He drastically violated Snape's privacy.
Oh yeah, definitely. Snape had every right to be angry. But this is one of those uncomfortable situations where there isn't really a good answer, because this could have been avoided if Dumbledore had thought this through.
Yep. All Dumbledore needed to do was sit Harry down, sit Severus down, and tell him, "Professor Snape, I want you to explain calmly and rationally why you are upset with the Potter family. Explain what happened. Explain it in objective and reasonable terms, in a method that this young boy will understand. And I'm sure, like you said, Harry knows all about being abused and bullied. I think Harry would have been immensely sympathetic.
Yep. But Dumbledore basically just threw them into this situation, knowing they couldn't stand each other, and hoped that, this happens a lot, that Snape, being an adult, would be able to just put aside past trauma and power through it. I don't see how people can just get over, his father tried to kill me and made my life a living hell the entire time I was at school.
Which, honestly, I don't think anyone should expect him to.
On the other hand, considering what was at stake if he couldn't, like, all Snape had to do was tell Dumbledore, I cannot do this thing you ask. We need to find him another teacher for occlumency, because, as we saw, Harry failing to learn occlumency got people killed.
Yep.
So, Dumbledore basically misread the situation and used his authority to put them in a situation that was completely untenable. Snape abused his authority through, trauma and not being able to come to terms with that or admit that he couldn't do it. So Harry really got failed there as, the kid in the situation, even though he absolutely did some stuff he shouldn't have been doing.
Yeah.
There's only so far you can give grace for just a kid in a situation, but there is some.
Especially since he's starting to get into the mid-teen years where he's expected to have a certain level of responsibility and understanding of, you are not just a child anymore, you are not an innocent, you are responsible for your actions.
Yep.
Harry this is book 5, he was 10 in the first book, so he would be 15, 16.
15.
So yeah, no, Harry is more than old enough to be responsible for his own actions. He is not young enough to still have the excuse of, I'm just a dumb kid.
Yeah, I just mean comparatively.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because, from my perspective, I teach, that age range. So I know that, yes, you're old enough to have a certain level of behavior, but, you are still very much a kid in many, many respects at that age. So on the emotional maturity spectrum, the two people in that room Snape would have been the one expected by society to keep his temper under control and do his job. As a teacher, you do not get to tell students that you hate them because of something their parents did.
Yep.
You have to do your job, even if you have a very touchy relationship with the child's parent. That has no place in the classroom.
Absolutely.
So, Harry did wrong. Harry should have apologized to Snape. Snape should have still been able to do his job.
Yep.
Even though, like, we can feel really, 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 really bad for Snape because that was a terrible situation and he had to relive some really awful memories as a result. But at the end of the day, Snape needed to tell Dumbledore that the situation wasn't going to work and find a workaround if he wasn't capable of doing it, considering how much was at stake.
Yep. And just to be blunt, Snape is old enough, practiced enough, and professional enough. He should be able to separate his personal feelings from his job. And him not being able to do that should be a huge mark against his professionalism as a teacher.
I mean, so should have been playing favorites for the entire time he's been a teacher.
Well, right, but we already
house.
covered that in prior episodes, so I wasn't going to belabor the point.
It's just like, no, there are other reasons that we could
There
say
are a
that
lot
we
of
can
reasons.
question professionalism.
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons we can question Snape's professionalism, but this is the one that's relevant to this episode and this discussion.
Okay, fair. And then obviously we have everything to do with Umbridge's abuse of her power and situation, which I think we talk quite a bit on other things. I don't want this episode to get too long, and there's a lot more to say on Umbridge that can be said for others.
We could go for a while on this on Umbridge, but Umbridge is going to get her own episode, so we can probably leave her for then.
Yeah, Umbridge touches on so many other aspects of power dynamics. As I said, this is a really vague and broad topic, so we'll have to get to that another time.
Yep.
That's all I can think to say for this one.
I was about to say, I think we've run the course on this particular subject with everyone except for Umbridge, unless there's a character dynamic that I'm not remembering at the moment that you want to cover.
I mean, I could just say Filch, but, you know, we kind of talked about that before, too. Filch doesn't really have any power until Umbridge gives it to him, and he is happy to abuse it.
Yeah. Filch is kind of in the similar situation to Snape, in that he has been abused all his life and has now seen an opportunity for him to use that abuse on someone else and get his due.
Which, you know, it's always a great situation. But yeah, it's probably a good place to leave it until next time.
Yep.
See you then.
See ya.